Hi, my name is Vesa Juvonen and I work as a principal consultant in Microsoft Corporation. In this module, we'll cover the new SharePoint user interface enhancements and extensibility. This is an important topic since the UI is the primary surface end users interact with to get things done. It's also the prime real estate for extensibility since we all need our customizations to surface somewhere. We'll cover the following key topics, which will cover the key enhancements and improvements for user experience. We'll start by introduction to the new user interface experience, since there's a lot of improvements to make the user interface more consistent despite the functionalities we are using. In the following section, we'll concentrate on the server-side ribbon. We'll cover how the ribbon has been implemented and how it can be customized or utilized in our own customizations. After that, we'll cover the new possibilities to show relevant messages for end users using status bar and notifications. One of the key improvements in sense of the so-called fluent user interface is the new dialog framework. We'll concentrate on how it's also implemented and how we could utilize also that one efficiently in our customizations. There has been also changes in the page handling and master page support for SharePoint 2010. These changes and possibilities are covered in the following section. And as a final topic, we'll concentrate on the changes concerning themes. So let's start by going through the details of the new user interface. In SharePoint 2007, there's many different surfaces to interact with. These surfaces each have unique aspects and ways to interact. For instance, context menus, site actions, and list actions might all contain items that operate on the list. It's not entirely clear what commands is available in each place and so on. And also, is the command available outside of the direct list view when the list is placed as a web part on a page. In 2007, when a user starts interacting with different surfaces, many of the commands will cause entire page to be reloaded or cause navigation to occur. Reloads and navigations are prime cause for end users losing focus and getting lost in their production. User productivity will decrease when they have a complex user interface to deal with. Product should allow people to focus on what they intend to do and should prevent users from needing to modify their normal working routines to work around product complexities. An important aspect of the SharePoint is its capability to create rich interactive dashboard pages using web parts. However, for authoring of these web parts, it's hard to show rich user interface for end users to interact with. The toolbar is rather ugly and single commands is rather limited. When you have more than one list view web part in a page, each of them might be rendered differently, depending on your settings. This adds clutter on a page and does not allow the same level of interaction when viewing each list separately. When people wanted to have rather simple page containing some formatted text and some information from list or two, they need a library to store their page. Shared document was often used in team site, but this library is named inappropriately. They need to create a web part page and add appropriate web parts. They need to interact with content editor web parts, which uses a separate tool pane for editing content, not that intuitive at all. Adding any rich content like images requires a separate image upload to some location first, and then difficult inclusion on a page where the web part or the image is shown. This editing experience was not that good and needed to be enhanced. In SharePoint 2010, the user interface provides consistent experience for formatting content and how to add rich elements on the page, for example, images. We don't have to add any web parts on a page if we don't like, to be able to have rich content available. All available actions for users are located in a single location, and if there's any need of this more complex configurations, we can utilize dialogues which don't redirect users to alternative locations. Also, the fact that web parts can provide functionalities to Ribbon will result fluent user experience, even though you would be adding new items to a list on the site. In this section, we'll concentrate on a ribbon and how it's implemented in SharePoint. We'll also cover how you can utilize the ribbon within our customizations to provide similar consistent user experience as for out-of-the-box functionalities. New Server Ribbon provides consistency with the client ribbon introduced already in the previous Office client versions. Ribbon is context-aware and can only show the relevant actions for shown content. It also supports, for example, dynamic resizing based on a screen resolution in a similar way as resize is supported by client-side Ribbon. Ribbon is also familiar, so end users can easily adapt to the tasks and functionalities available. Technically, Ribbon is implemented using XML-based configuration and JavaScript. There's a rich JavaScript interface for developers to use for further enhance or change the behaviors available. Ribbon is designed in a way that it's, especially when we use out-of-the-box master pages, always rendered on the top of the page, and it doesn't scroll out of the view. This way the end users can always locate the available functionalities easily from one consistent location. Ribbon provides contextual tab model, which means that it only shows relevant actions for the users depending on the context. Good example is, for example, the imaging editing option, which are shown in its own tab, and only when user selects the image to be modified. A lot of the out-of-the-box functionalities in a ribbon provide command review functionality. Basically, users can see what would happen if the command is executed before it's applied. Good example of this is the font size preview. Ribbon is dynamically scaled based on available screen resolution. So if buttons are not rendered using a large image properly, they are automatically scaled to smaller images. Ribbon also provides capability to have so-called super tooltips. You can define these also for custom buttons added to the page. This means that you are able to provide proper description of the functionality with adding a tooltip images and so on. Ribbon supports not just buttons, but also other controls to be used in rendering. There's quite a few different types of controls available, which you can use to provide functionalities for end users. All supported controls are listed on the left side of the screen. And as you can see, there's a lot of different possibilities. Only control which we don't have out of the box is the gallery control compared to the client-side ribbon, but you can mock up this using the existing controls if required. Ribbon XML defines the UI, and the actual behavior is dependent on the JavaScript. A lot of the out-of-the-box functionalities utilizes heavily JavaScript client object model to provide different functionalities available. Ribbon is either server or client rendered. All JavaScript loaded for the ribbon is loaded on demand to optimize the initial loading time of the page. There's also no tables used in ribbon rendering. It uses CSS layouts and styling to provide the UI. Out-of-the-box buttons have been optimized in that sense that they use clustered images, so that the overall amount of round trips and requests from browser to server side is optimized. Basically, this means that instead of loading individual images one by one, we are loading clustered images which are single images containing the graphics for multiple buttons, and then CSS is used to only show certain areas of the particular image. This will enhance the performance of the or decrease the network load. Let's move to ribbon extensibility. Ribbon is fully extensible, which means that you can remove or replace any of the out-of-the-box controls. You can also add new controls to the ribbon based on your requirements. Potentially, you could even replace the ribbon entirely, but we think that it's actually providing some value, so hopefully you're not taking this route. Ribbon also provides backward compatibility for the custom actions in 2007. If you had custom actions in toolbars which are not available anymore, these would be now available in the Custom Commands tab. Note though that since Ribbon is fully client-side code, those custom commands which used server-side code are not supported in SharePoint 2010. If you use server-side code in your custom actions with previous versions, you'll need to refactor the code to achieve the same functionality in 2010. So how do we actually add the new controls to the ribbon? There's a ribbon XML which basically defines the key elements of the ribbon. Easiest way to add new controls to the ribbon is to use the declarative approach and define the new controls using new ribbon-related custom actions. More complex behavior might require a JavaScript page component to be created to achieve the desired functionality. So what does it actually mean in practice? Let's have a more detailed look on this in the following slide. Out-of-the-box ribbon controls are defined in Command UI XML. This file is located in a template global XML folder at the 14 root folder. This file contains the main definitions for the out-of-the-box ribbon. We are using custom actions to add new controls to the ribbon itself. This is defined in some feature element XML file using specific ribbon-dependent elements. Key attributes are location and scope. Location defines where the control will be placed, and the scope attributes can be obviously used to define the scope of the definition. When the page is rendered, controls defined in a Command UI definition section are merged to Command UI, and ribbon is generated. If you have a Command UI handlers for your controls itself, these are added to the page separately to handle the functionalities of the control. If you don't define the Command UI handlers, you're responsible of adding the JavaScript page component on a page and registering that correctly. Basically, it's much more easier to use the Command UI handlers directly from a custom action if possible. If you don't have extensive amount of JavaScript, you might want to leverage the alternative options. This is an example of custom action registration. In this case, we are registering our button to be shown on a document libraries. More detailed, the button will be shown in a new group of the document library ribbon. Notice that we are also defining the unique identifier for actual control to be placed on a page. In this case, the identifier is ribbon.documents.new.demo button, which follows up the naming convention to be followed. So when you're naming your controls or creating the identifier for your controls, it's recommended to use the same naming conventions as for most of the out-of-the-box controls, meaning basically the naming convention ribbon.id of the tab, .group of the .id of the group, the actual button ID or the control ID. Sequence attribute defined in a button defines the control location within the group. Command attribute defines the identifier of the command action to be performed when a button is clicked. You want to ensure that it's unique string for your command. This defines the command UI handler which should be used. Good naming convention is to use the ID of the controls and extend that with the unique identifier. In this case, we have defined the identifier to be documents_new_demo_action. The template alias defines the template to be used. Every group has the templates which they use for layouting their controls. Most of the out-of-the-box groups uses flexible2 template, which have two sections, O1 and O2, which stands for overflow 1 and overflow 2. This means that you can add as many buttons or controls as you want, and the template will just be expanding. If you get the template alias wrong, groups are unable to decide where do you want to put your controls, which causes the control not to be rendered. The Command UI handler defines the actual action to be performed when user clicks the button. If you add an URL here, user will be redirected to a particular address. You can also write JavaScript like in this example, where we just show the JavaScript alert whenever user clicks particular button. Out-of-the-box button locations are listed in a Command UI XML file, as mentioned in the previous slide. When you're adding your own controls or buttons to existing groups, you define the location based on this file. In that case, the location would be something like ribbon.tab.thegroup-to-use.controls._children. You want to, however, verify the location identifiers from the Command UI XML to ensure the exact identifiers to be used. Within the example, we are adding a custom convert documents button to a document libraries. So in this case, the location would be ribbon.documents.manage.controls._children. Basically meaning that the button would be visible in the document libraries in a managed group, and it will be placed there. The order within the group is based on the sequence attribute defined for the control itself. The concept of multi-level targeting is that the ribbon shows content for multiple levels in SharePoint. So if you are within the site, so site context applies. You might be on a page, so the page content applies too. On this page, you might have a selected list web. On the page, you might have a selected list web part, which also adds the context of what buttons and controls to be shown in ribbon. So there's no need actually go to the list to work with the list. You can just do it by do that from anywhere you see the list data. Out-of-the-box list handling is a really good example of providing these buttons to ribbon to manipulate the data of the list without losing the user's context in the user interface. Let's have a demo concerning how do we actually add the button to the ribbon and what are the tasks and elements we need to be aware of.
Excellent. In this demo we'll see how do we actually add the ribbon buttons to SharePoint ribbon using XML, which is now available from the feature framework as well. The key point which we covered already in the slide was the fact that every single ribbon element has their unique ID, and we need to define the location where we actually set our functionalities. In this case, we want to add a few new buttons to the pages ribbon, which is available for these wiki pages within the theme site. The unique IDs are stored in the Command UI XML file, which can be found underneath the 14 root template global XML. And in here we can actually see the different IDs which are available. So for example, wiki page tab, we can see that the wiki page tab has the following settings, and there is following groups and following controls and so on. So we use these identifiers to define to which control set, for example, we want our button to be added. So if we would like to add, for example, a custom button to edit and checkout control group, that would be the ID or the location would be this one. So let's actually have a look on the Visual Studio side. In this case, we have a Visual Studio project which actually has two different ribbon customizations. Other one is relatively simple, where we only add one button to a existing ribbon group. Let's a little bit resize the Solution Explorer so we're actually able to see what are we adding here. And the key point with the IDs is the location. So when we define that the ribbon Wikipage share control on children will be the location, we will be adding our custom button underneath this share group. And of course, obviously, when we add a button to the ribbon, we also need to name or give an identifier for that button to make it truly work. In this case, we are using the same naming convention as the out-of-the-box ones, and then we have the demo button. The key point which we also are setting in here for the button is the command. So in this case we use command demo hello world again. And this has to be unique, otherwise there will be multiple buttons hitting the same custom command UE handler. So we can define this actually to be based on the ID as well. In this case it's a demo hello world again, and that will reflect to this command UE handler, and on that handler we have the actual JavaScript which will be called when we click the button. Relatively simple and straightforward. The other example which we have in this demo is how to add a group to ribbon, which is a little bit more higher level control. So the buttons, if we have a look on this one, it was supposed to go to share and demo button. Let's have a look on where does it actually go. So we have the share and track functionality, so that button will be in here. The share and track functionality itself is a group, like the manage in here is a group. And we can also define these custom groups for our custom buttons if we want. And that it's a little bit more complicated XML, but it follows up the same rules. So if we do add a group, we need to define first the UI definition, and the key point here is that we are adding group to Wikipage groups, and we have the unique identifier for the group, and within the group we have controls, and we have a single button at this demo. And this is also a relatively simple button which will do a demo hello world, and there's a hello world JavaScript handler for that particular button as well. But it will be rendered in its own group, and the group itself will have its own text which will be available, which is a Ignite custom group. Let's deploy our customization to the SharePoint, and since we are modifying only SharePoint ribbon, we can actually deploy our customization as a sandbox solution. So they will be available quite quickly. And we don't have to recycle the IIS, and the deployment is really fast and straightforward. As we can see, the deployment has succeeded already, so let's move back to our team site, and let's refresh the page so that the ribbon settings are refreshed as part of the rendering. So now the command UI, the definition in command UI XML and our definitions in the feature framework will be merged, and when we go to the page tab we can see two different buttons available. We have the simple button within the share group, and we have our own Ignite custom group where we also have a one button existing at the moment. We could easily have multiple additional buttons here as well, or other controls. So now when we click this button, our JavaScript will be executed, and we're able to do whatever is requested based on the business requirements. And we can easily combine, for example, JavaScript client object model to these buttons to actually start modifying the site structure directly when these buttons are clicked. Relatively simple, relatively straightforward, as long as we get the IDs correctly and we know the location where we actually are putting these buttons to. And that sums up our demo.
Let's continue with the details concerning status bar and notifications, and how we can actually show additional messages for the end users without interrupting their actions they're performing within the page. The status bar and notification area are prime places to show messages to end users. Both of these have a little bit different purpose. General idea is to provide relevant content for the end users in the context without distracting them. Status bar should be placed to display persistent. Status bar should be used to display persistent information such as page status, page version, or some action to be performed. Notifications are used for transient or semi-transient messages. The status bar can be shown in a few fixed color that indicates a positive or negative status. The notification area is used for smaller messages. Of course, both items can be accessed through the code, so you can show your own messages using SharePoint infrastructure. Good examples of the notifications are the messages shown during the page life cycle, like saving the page and so on. As mentioned in a previous slide, status bar is aimed to be used for persistent information. Status bar is located just below the ribbon through the user interface. There are 4 different reset background colors available for the messages, which also indicate the importance of the message. If you have 2 messages shown at the same time with 2 different importance levels, higher priority messages will define the color to be used. For extensibility, there's JavaScript and server-side APIs. Using the JavaScript, we can add and remove the messages shown on the status bar area. We can also specify the message color to be used depending on our requirements. Server-side statuses can be set during the page rendering time using a specific out-of-the-box server control placed on a page or on a web part. Message shown within the status bar is HTML, which means that we can include links and images if required. Good example of a status bar message is the health monitoring messages shown in the central administration application. If there's any critical issues detected on the SharePoint farm, an administrator opens up a central administration application, there are high priority red messages with a link to additional information shown on the front page of the application. This slide defines the APIs to manipulate the status bar using JavaScript. Using the JavaScript API, we can do all the necessary actions required for manipulating the information shown. We can quite easily add, update, and remove status messages. We can also modify the status priority color, defining the color as a parameter for function call. Note that even though we have the remove all status function available, it's not a good practice to use it, since you might not be the only one adding the status messages to the page. Rather use the remove status with a specific identifier. In this example, we have 2 different functions which would be called, for example, from ribbon buttons. Show yellow message function is adding message using add status function. In this case, we add also some example HTML content on a status message to demonstrate the purposes and capabilities. Immediately after the message has been added, we are changing the background color from a default value to yellow. Other supported options would be red, blue, and green. Notice how to store the unique identifier to myMessage variable so that we can use that identifier to further modify or remove the message. This is exactly the case which is demonstrated in the hide yellow message function. In this function we call the remove status function with a unique identifier as a parameter. This will remove the identified message from the status bar. As mentioned in the previous slides, we can also define status messages from the server-side code during the rendering time of the page. This can be achieved by using the Microsoft.webcontrols.sp page status setter control, which will be responsible of updating the message to UI as part of the page rendering. Since the server-side control is only available on rendering time of the page, we obviously cannot use this control to remove the messages without postbacks. This control can be used to indicate some status information of the sites or guiding the end users to perform some tasks which have not been yet done. As also mentioned in the introduction slide, the notifications are transient or semi-transient information. By default, notifications are shown in the right side of the page immediately underneath the ribbon. When we are adding notification, it will be visible for the end users by default for 5 seconds. You can alternatively use so-called sticky message option, which would require that you would need to be responsible of removing the notification by yourself. For extensibility purposes, we have JavaScript API, which can be used to add and remove these messages from UI. Like the status bar messages, notification messages are also HTML, so you can include any links, images, or other HTML elements for your message as needed. With the notifications, we have 2 different API calls available. Add notifications for adding our notifications to the UI, and remove notifications, obviously, to remove them. If you have a specific notification, if you specify the notification to be sticky, like in the example given as a parameter, you'll need to remove the notification by yourself. This process is demonstrated on the example. We first add the notification with the sticky option enabled and store the status identifier. Since the status identifier has been stored, we can use that also to remove the message from the UI. Let's have a closer look on the status bar and notification messages and how they are shown and how we can utilize them within our customizations.
In this demo we'll concentrate on status bar and notes functionality, which we can obviously utilize from the ribbon or from any web port as well. In this case, for the clarity, to make this thing simple, we have implemented this based on a custom web port, which is a visual web port, so we can more easily show the JavaScript which will be executed. But as we covered in the slides, the notifications and status bars can be used or started from the JavaScript as well. We have 4 different colors available for the status bar messages, and we can easily customize the messages to be added to the status bar. Let's first have a look on the client-side functionality and then see how this is actually implemented. Let's add here a custom message, which will be included to our messages which we add to the status bar. And if I now click the Show Red Client-Side Message, we will see the red message and the custom message, and with that one link which could actually point to anywhere we want. The color coding is based on priority of the messages which we are showing. So that means the following. So if I now hide the red message and let's set the blue message here, which is a little bit different message. Well, it has the blue message and a custom message text as well. But now if there's an additional more important message to be shown, like the yellow or red message, the whole status bar will be recolored based on the highest priority of the messages. And as we covered in the slides, the priority is from blue, green, yellow to red. So now we have a blue message and a yellow message, so the yellow will be the color to be shown. On the yellow message we also had a GIF animation included just to demonstrate the fact that the messages are actually HTML. This means that if we now add a new message, which is a red message, we're able to see that every single message will be colored to red, since the red message is the highest priority message. And obviously if I hide these one by one, the framework will recolor the status bar based on the highest priority. So basically meaning that if I get rid of the red message, we'll go back to the yellow message, and hide the yellow message, we go back to the blue message. And we can also hide the actual blue message. The fourth color which we didn't see is the green one, and it has the same behavior as for any other colors as well. So we're basically able to use this JavaScript APIs to add these messages, modify them, or hide them, or recolor them. I'll show how it's done after demonstrating the other functionalities from here. We can also do or update the status bar messages directly using a server-side control. This would be usable, for example, if you have created a site and you want to request additional information, or you want to guide the end user to some alternative page to do additional configuration settings or whatever, or requesting information. So whenever we request a site, we're using the server-side message to generate the whatever we want to show within the status bar. So this comes from the server-side, ignite server-side message, and we will do a full postback as part of this. And this demonstrates the fact that we can define these status bar messages directly from the server-side as well. We can also include the links, for example, the site settings and whatever is required for your functionality. Now if I request the page, since we're not checking the status again, the server-side message is gone. Obviously you can in your code check if the user has actually done the requested action and show the message again if required. Other thing which was really interesting concerning the messages is the notifications. And we have two types of notifications available. We have the non-sticky notifications, which we can add to inform the end users of our actions which have been performed. And these messages will be automatically hidden within 5 seconds of their existence. And these are kind of alert messages to indicate some action or behavior to be done, or confirm some action the end user has done without affecting the end user's user experience that much. The other option is to have sticky information, which is basically a notification which we are responsible for removing. So that notification won't be removed until we explicitly tell from the JavaScript that notification to go away. This could be, for example, useful if you want to show that let's say that you are creating numerous lists or creating some structures based using JavaScript client object model, and you want to indicate that the functionalities are still ongoing. And after every single thing has been executed, then you remove the sticky notification within your JavaScript client object model. Let's have a look how these actually are done in the code side. So let's move to Visual Studio and let's open up our visual web part, which is having all of the required JavaScript code. As you saw from the UI is relatively simple. We have only a few different links available and a few different controls or text boxes which you can actually use. And most of the functionalities we demonstrated are based on JavaScript and client-side functionalities, but there was also the possibility to utilize SP page status setter, which is something which we can use as part of the rendering of our actual page to inform information. So basically meaning the following: we have the text box 2, and the button 1, and we have the SP page status setter. And from the actual code, we can see that we are creating a status to be shown based on the settings on the page and based on the information in the text box, and we are adding a link also to site settings page. And then we use the status setter add status method to actually get the status to be shown within the UI. And for this we can definitely say what kind of color we will be using when we actually render the message within the UI. So this was responsible of the following functionality. If we move back to the site and we tell here ignite message, click the server message, and we will get the server after server-side post back. We're getting some messages posted to the status bar. The other functionalities were client-side functionalities, so let's have a look on those and the implementation of those ones. We have the show message 0123, and we have the sticky notify and non-sticky notify functions. The show message functionality is based on the following implementation. So within the show message, we first see if we have our array of 4 items available. If it's not, we create it. This is used to store the message IDs, which we actually are showing within the UI. Then we get the txt message, which was one of the text boxes on the site, so we include that as part of our message. And if there is already existing ID or existing message with the same ID present, we are removing it. And then we check that based on a case, based on a number, we are setting the color either to blue, red, green, or yellow. But for actual adding the message in, we're using the SP UI status add status method or function, which will be available, and for that we can say the title and the actual message and how it will be behaving. The key point here is that we are taking the ID of the message shown and storing that to our array. So whenever we click hide, we are able to use that information to hide our message using the remove status function. Based on the ID, we are hiding the messages from the UI. Let's refresh from the user interface side, basically meaning the following. If I request the page one more time, we can add green message, we can add yellow message, we can get rid of the green message, we can get rid of the yellow message, we can add green, we can add blue, get rid of the green message, and get rid of the blue message. So we're storing all the time the IDs to be able to hide them based on our functionality and based on the ID which we used for showing the message in the UI. The other part of the demo was concerning the sticky notifications and non-sticky notifications, generally notifications. If we have a look on those APIs, we have the non-sticky notify, which basically means that we're adding using the SPUI notify add notification, but the key point here is that the sticky indication is false, so that the message will be shown within 5 seconds in the UI. If we set the message